So hello everybody. How you doing? We're here for the cosmic currency of the new moon in Libra total solar eclipse. And we're going to go over some of the aspects in this chart, which has a lot going on, if I'm going to be honest with you. The new moon itself that we're having today is in the sign of Libra within 4 degrees of the south node and conjunct black moon Lilith and Mercury and a lesser known luminary called Astrea. It's super powerful, and we're talking about the aspects that are highlighted from this because Libra is ruled by Venus, who is in Scorpio. And the moon is being affected by Mars because Mars is in the moon's sign of Cancer. The sun is ruled by Leo, and we don't have a lot in Leo outside of Volcanus, which is the forge. But I find it interesting because Venus and Mars had a moment where they were caught by Vulcan, Hephaestus, and that is his domain, right? Vulcan lives inside the volcano, which is what Volcanus represents. And there's all this interesting energy geared towards Aries, where the North Node is, right? This is all in opposition to the North Node in Aries, and both Mars and Scorpio, right? Scorpio's original ruler was Mars, and it's the main planetary influence on the sign of Aries. So even though there is not a whole lot touching on the North Node itself, it is highly influenced by the energy of the grand water trine, and the water trine itself is highly influenced by the energy going on in Libra with this new moon. So let's talk a little bit, because Libra is a sign of partnerships. It rules the 7th house and the descendant line in a chart where the sun sets. That's why Libra's symbol looks like that. It rules the sun set. The 10th house is where high noon is, and the ascendant line is where the sun ascends, right? It's the rising of the sun. So Libra being the house of partnerships and the ruler of the descendant line where Mars is in Cancer, at least if you are in or around, Chicago, Illinois, which is where I do the chart from. It would change if you were located elsewhere in the world. But having the new moon eclipse in Libra is a big deal, especially conjunct the south node, because the south node is a magic eraser for things that are in misalignment. And the sun and the moon passed through it before their conjunction here. Anything that is misaligned within the masculine energy of the sun and the feminine energy of the moon going into this conjunction is being erased, right? You pair that with Lilith, and Lilith, much like Chromie here, is wildly independent and widely misunderstood. Lilith is a rebel and flies the flag of freedom. The lack of submission that comes from Lilith's energy is very present in this new moon. This is very positive for couples or partners, even in business, that are in alignment with the independence of each other, meaning who they are as individuals works cohesively. These energies are allowing the feminine within the self, the collective self, to intercede what the mind would have chosen to act on if it was out of alignment. When we talk about solar eclipses, the sun is interrupted, right, in its light reaching the earth by the moon. The moon blocks the sun. And it's the aspect of yin and yang. If you think about the symbol where yang, or the white half of the yin yang symbol, has the black dot. Total solar eclipses are exactly that. It's the feminine within the masculine aspect. The feminine is wise beyond time itself. It knows things that the mind couldn't possibly know with its limited perspective based off of what it perceives, right? And what it sees, what it comes to understand via experience. The black side of the moon being in its full power, the feminine energy that we don't see, takes control with this transit and allows partnerships to thrive when both partners are helping the other rise as an individual. Okay. North Node in Aries. The integration of that, right? Anytime we have oppositions in a chart, there's integration of the two different facets of those signs. And so there's a lot of energy to support this via the conjunctions. Even Mercury being a very mental planet, right? In the realm of thought and thinking, communication, what we speak about, how we make deals. All of this energy is integrating with the North Node in Aries. The thing is, it's taking on certain challenges, right? From Mars. Mars is squaring that energy. Now, Mars in Cancer, it's highly emotional reactions and the severing of codependency. So if the partnership that you are involved in is not in alignment, it's eliciting highly emotional reactions that could potentially sever the partnership. Mars, being ruled by Aries, is the symbol of the knife, which cuts the umbilical cord as we travel through the womb that is Pisces, right? When we cross this threshold. Hey, Tanya, how you doing? When we cross this threshold. So there's this kind of, and me and Tanya were talking about it earlier, these birthing pains. They feel like birthing pains to get to the new place where partners are in fact working together as individuals, and having it be in alignment can be a little rough. The positive aspect that Mars is taking on from Saturn and Venus, Venus being in its detriment in Scorpio, Venus is not happy there. Okay. It's the first sign out from her home of Libra, and she's not happy in Scorpio. But Scorpionic Venus really is this till death do us part, but it's more of an I will love you for lifetimes kind of deep, right? Scorpio Venus can absolutely love so hard that it will sacrifice itself, right? In the sign of the Scorpion. People with natal Venus Scorpio know this. They go above and beyond and will suffer greatly for the people that they love if they feel that progress or transformation can happen, right? Scorpio is a sign of transformation. With that being said, Venus is kind of tempering this Mars energy, because Mars being emotionally reactive and almost becoming a victim to emotional warfare, right? When we lack sovereignty, when we allow other people to get the best of us and we act out of our highest good character, right? When we quote unquote go down to their level. Venus in Scorpio is saying, I think if you give it a little more love, a little more attention, that it can transform. Saturn in Pisces, being in this grand water trine, is asking people to stick it out for soul reasons. There's lessons to be learned in these very emotionally volatile connections that we have with people. And so even though the grand water trine is highly beneficial, right? Trines are a beneficial aspect. They really are in detriment, right? Mars in Cancer, Mars being electrified by the energy of the North Node, right? That it's carrying that energetic signature of the North Node, knows when something is not right, knows when something is not in alignment. That's the intuition kicking off with it being in Cancer. It wants to cut things off. It wants to look at the situation that is emotionally triggering for it and say, this cannot persist. It's not fair, right? It's not fair. Something's not fair about it. Something is out of balance. It's pointing out what is out of balance. And so you may be talking to people that you were in partnerships with coming out of this eclipse about what cannot persist. The imbalances that are created within the dynamic that set off these emotional triggers cannot continue, because if they continue, the dynamic is over, right? The partnership is over. Lilith would rather abandon paradise than submit and be subservient and be told that she is not equal when she is. People who have abandoned themselves, their higher selves specifically, don't like this conversation. They don't like this conversation. For people in the shadow of Lilith and they're in self-abandonment, ultimately they're going to get cut off. Because as the mind and the heart pass through and over this energy, moving beyond Lilith to Astrea. Astrea, the way I describe the archetypal energy of Astrea is like a healing river of diamond white light that kind of washes over everything and makes it better. When we allow certain connections and partnerships that are in misalignment go, there's this wave of peace that comes with the severance, like cutting out the rot, cutting out the energy that brings us down into the dissension, right? It brings us down into this vibration of, fetch water, chop wood, that feels like settling. where we know we're meant for more, and yet we're being pulled into this everyday routine that gets redundant and stagnates when we're not being creative with our life. This energy is also being challenged with a sesquiquadrate from Uranus, right? We have Uranus down here retrograding at 26 degrees in Taurus. Taurus, which is also ruled by Venus, and it's sesquiquadrate or sesquisquaring this energy up here. Severing certain things, certain partnerships ending, really does create a radical shift to the reality, radical shift to finances, radical shift to your possessions. And there's a fear state there, right? This is emotionally triggering. It's not in alignment. Something is off. But if I let it go, my world is going to radically change. My finances are going to be radically affected. And that is scary. And so there's this square and a half, which is what a sesquisquare is. That is asking you, how much is your alignment worth? Do you trust that things you lose can be replaced? Or are you going to stick it out hell or high water to make it work and stay just a little bit longer and suffer just a little bit more in order to keep this contract, this karmic, painful contract going? You know, putting that stress on the soul, feeling restricted in soul, just to make it work, right? Is it really worth it? I think that the beauty of the grand water trine for people in partnership and people just simply in alignment with themselves is knowing that they are intuitively acting from such a deep place of self-love that the soul is in order. You know that the things that you're choosing are so deeply aligned with you that you're kind of floating in this dark space that feels like, you know, subterranean water, dark water, and feeling at peace there in the mystery of it all, because it really is deep. This deep love for the self, this deep compassion for the self, the transformation of the self, and acting in accordance with your intuition to continue nurturing the soul, right? That's where this water trine is truly powerful for individuals. With Venus being in a semi-sextile to all of this energy, like, yes, it can be applied to partnerships, but I promise you, the partnerships are only going to work if both people are in that space, kind of floating in the dark mystery of it all together, trusting their intuition as they're holding hands. You know, it's that kind of energy. Venus in Scorpio, if you've seen images of people who die together, right, where one person dies and then the other person, it's kind of like The Notebook, like curls up next to them and passes away with them. Like, that's Venus in Scorpio energy. If you die, I die. You know, we die together. We go into the next life together. Our love lasts beyond this lifetime. Venus in Scorpio, even though it is considered a detriment, is such an unequivocally beautiful energy. Nothing else really compares to the love that Venus in Scorpio is capable of. When we, at least in regards to individuals, Venus in Pisces is a whole nother animal. But Venus in Scorpio with Mars here, and the conversation that they're having, it's, I water you, you water me. That's the goal. with our relationships with people and the collective in general. Saturn in Pisces is demanding that order. I water you, you water me, and we both grow. That is the high order of things. Anything that is not helping you grow, or anything you're doing that is not helping another grow, is ultimately going to trigger something up in the emotions that kind of sets the ball rolling towards severance. Okay. Saturn in Pisces is quincunxing on this energy. Okay. Now, quincunxes are wild cards. They're either wildly favorable or wildly unfortunate. And Saturn in Pisces, wild favor is the sealing of soul order, where we seal fate and destiny with order in the soul. That would be the highest expression of Saturn in Pisces and quincunx to this energy, where the freedom and independence and equality between people is reached and order to the soul is had. The shadow of that aspect, or the worst case scenario of this aspect, would be sealing misaligned or imbalanced relationships that put people under a lot of pressures and kind of bind them with chains, right? Where they're bound to each other and they're in their own little orbit, no longer allowed to participate in the acts that transpire for the greater healing. They're kind of bubbled off, left to their own little world, right? Their own bubbles. They're no longer, like, they're present, but they're not really participating in the elevation of things unless they tune into this energy, right? Unless they tune into this intuitive energy, unless they start listening to the uncomfortable triggers, unless they start listening to the pain body within themselves that's saying, I don't want to be in this pain anymore, right? I don't want to be under this restriction anymore. I don't want to be in these chains, right? These karmic contracts that are binding. There's always a way out. Like, no one is ever stuck forever, you know. It's a matter of choice. It's always a matter of choice. But for those who are kind of just running through default shadows and are unaware of themselves and unaware of cycles and unaware of the healing that, you know, could, should, would take place, it's kind of where they end up. They end up in these little bubbles. Saturn, with its semi-square to Pluto and Capricorn, right? We have Saturn here, and it's got this semi-square to Pluto, who is retrograding in Capricorn for the last time in this life. Pluto, I feel like Pluto is telling Saturn that the punishment or the chains is not enough. It's got to go further than that. Saturn allows the choice to remove the chains, right? If you think about like tarot and the devil card, which, you know, Capricorn and Saturn rules, the chains are easily removed. You can choose it with a choice at any time to remove it. Pluto, on the other hand, knows no limits, right? It's a transformation malefic that knows no limits. Saturn is the lord of time and would, you know, maybe limit things to this lifetime, right? The karma or the healing or the pain, the suffering would be limited to this lifetime. Pluto says, this is not enough. Just suffering it out this life for the choices that they're making in misalignment. are not enough. In fact, I'm going to bring it into next lifetime. I'm going to force them to suffer coming into the next life. Pluto, ruled by Scorpio, rules reincarnation and rebirth. It's in trine to Uranus and sextile to Neptune. Neptune is doing this triangulation, right? It's sextiling on Pluto and sextiling on Uranus, and they're in trine together, right? There's this triangulation going on, a very beneficial one. And so Uranus and Neptune, Neptune being the womb, right, or the passage of the womb where we exit and come into this life, and Uranus being a radical transformation of perspective, they are all in agreement. Neptune and Uranus are in agreement with Pluto as it concerns Saturn. I feel like, because Saturn being in the grand water trine, it feels good to ride it out in this life, even if it's painful, right? There are certain things that even if it's sufferable, even if it has more bad moments than it does good, it's kind of telling you those good moments are worth it, though. It's like spiritual breadcrumbs, if I'm going to be honest. And so Saturn is like, can't we see the good in it, though? You know, it's not all bad. Saturn is like, it's not all bad getting this wash of energy from Venus and Mars. But Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune are like, but it is that bad. It's going against the soul healing, right? You can't just end it here and, you know, disregard the damage that these individual partnerships are causing in the collective ripple. You can't just bubble them off. Pluto wants to pop the bubble. Pluto wants to pop the bubble. Like, Pluto doesn't care about the good moments, right? The spiritual breadcrumbs of good moments that are keeping people in these pain cycles for a very long time. Pluto says, pop the bubble. I want them inside the collective, right? Neptune. I want them inside the collective. I want this radical shift of perspective, right? Uranus. I want these radical changes to take place on a collective level. You cannot just put these people, these partners, in bubbles and pretend that they can't participate. They have to participate in the collective healing. Like, they're a part of this whole. Saturn wants to restrict them and bubble them off. And Pluto said no. Right? Pluto said no. And Uranus and Neptune are in total agreement to that. So there's this kind of energy where even if partnerships are in misalignment and trying to survive it, it's not going to last beyond this nodal cycle. By the time the nodes switch to Virgo and Pisces from Aries and Libra, by the time these nodes switch, I feel like any misalignment, it's going to be, how would I describe it? It's going to feel like you're walking on eggshells with life. You're walking on eggshells at life. It's going to feel extremely fragile, that anything could go wrong and ruin it, because Virgo is meticulous and Pisces is the transition from womb to world. And the smallest mistake could end it. It's going to put people on eggshells, especially as they try and maintain their sovereignty from people who are emotionally vampiric. We're going to feel that pretty hard when Mars retrogrades back into Cancer. because it's going to dip into Leo and then it's going to retrograde back into Cancer. We're going to feel these energies. And there's this real push for higher partnership. Not only is Venus and Mars in trine, but you also have this interesting little trine going on with Jupiter here and Juno, right? 18 degrees Libra for Juno and 21 degrees Gemini for Libra, and or for Libra, for Jupiter. 21 degrees Gemini for Jupiter. Jupiter and Juno are Zeus and Hera. They're the high masculine and feminine energy kind of going off in the background, saying, yeah, you can be Venus and Mars, high lust, right? But not meant to be together. Like Venus is wed to Hephaestus. Venus and Mars, for all of the attraction in the world that they have towards each other, are not meant to be together. It causes problems when they are together. This other trine going on between Jupiter and Juno is kind of telling people to look at the mirror in Gemini and what true balance is with Juno. There's more to life than lusty chemical contracts. There's more to life than competing with someone else to be better. Staying in partnerships because you feel better than someone else for having it, right? The competition that comes along with Mars, that competitive edge. We will fight for things to keep things that are not meant for us just to be better than other people. We will hold on to things emotionally and use it like warfare. An example would be, two guys fall in love with the same girl and maybe they were best friends, and, maybe Venus and Mars kicked it off after, Venus was with Hephaestus type thing. And Hephaestus, though it is painful to admit that his wife is cheating, keeps Venus, despite the fact that he's hurting just to compete with Mars. I'm better than you. You are the god of war. You're this beautiful god, right? Mars is beautiful, and Hephaestus is this ugly little god, right? He's malformed. And he's like, I'm better than you. I have her, and I'm not letting her go, even if it's painful, right? It's kind of similar. It's kind of similar. Like there's a part of us that is so emotionally triggered to be better that we hold on to things that are not necessarily in alignment. A lot of that is going on. There's these high lust connections that, if there's other interference going on in the world, or there's other relationships that, people are meant to be in, the competitive edge is kind of ruining the higher healing. Like maybe Hephaestus should let Venus go. Like Venus is not a possession. She's a god. She's not a possession. She was given to Hephaestus like a possession. But if she chooses of her own free will, she chooses to be with Mars. The lesson on the whole is be with people that you choose, not choosing people or staying with people because you have to or because you want to be better than someone else. right? Another example that's completely different would be like, you know, having this really expensive car, this flashy car to show off and be better than other people, but it's driving a hole in your wallet and your bank account and you really can't afford it. But you continue to be in that detrimental financial state to be flashy and feel like you're better than everyone else because you drive this, you know, insanely gorgeous car. Whatever is triggering emotionally, it really has to be paid attention to because it's not in alignment. You know, yeah, people have partnerships with other people, but people have partnerships with their things. People have partnerships in business. People feel connected, right? Because Venus being the ruler of both Libra and Taurus, Taurus is the sign of possessions. That's mine. That's mine. People get very attached to their things and what those things do for them emotionally. Some people, you know, call it having sentiment. You know, it has some kind of nostalgia to it. There's, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh no, it's escaping me. It's going to make me mad too. I think it begins with an S, but regardless, there's this vibration of needing to let things from the past go. Needing to let things from the past go. Sometimes contracts, even Saturnian contracts, are temporary. They're not really meant to go into the next life. And I think Saturn knows that. They're not meant to go into the next life. They're meant to live it out and then finish. And Pluto is kind of really pushing to extend it into the next life. And I think that's where people get into a lot of trouble with different past life soulmates that pop up because they don't know who they're meant to be with. They have all these different debts, right, from past lives. And Pluto does rule debt. It rules debt. We feel indebted to people. When we make mistakes and we stick it out in karmic contracts that breadcrumb us with satisfaction, breadcrumb us with peace, breadcrumb us with good moments, happy memories, when the majority of it is bad. And then we pass on and we reincarnate and we look at it like, well, damn, you know, I was with this person for so long and I should have been with them. Like, we do feel the almost, it's almost guilt, right? It's like guilt for not choosing our high alignment. And guilt's a low vibration. So when we reincarnate into, you know, the next life and we exit Pisces and into the sign of self of Aries all over again, and we forget we have these different karmic contracts and we don't know who we're meant to be with because of this vibration of debt. When do we move beyond it and choose our healing? Lilith being conjunct this new moon is calling for exactly that. When do we move beyond it? When, in the mythos of it all, does Adam stop his relationship with Eve just to get an emotional reaction out of Lilith? She's better than you. I'm with her because she's better than you. She's subservient and that makes her better. When does it stop? Lilith is like, just because she's subservient doesn't make her better. It means she's subservient. What is better? You have no idea what could possibly happen, what we could possibly create if you actually treated me and respected me like an equal. How do you know it's better? You didn't try to treat me like an equal. You know, there's this energy going on of, well, what if people dropped the competition? What if people stopped pinning people against the other or trying to elicit emotional reactions out of the other to make them feel less than so that they feel more than? See, I'm better than you. I created what I wanted. And Lilith is looking at him like, you don't even know what you want. You don't even know what you want. If it was in alignment, would you have gotten kicked out of paradise? No. If it was in alignment, you would have stayed there. You got kicked out of paradise for a reason. Like, Lilith didn't get kicked out. She chose to leave because she realized that being with Adam, who wanted someone subservient, was not paradise. And so she left. So she left. She said, I will not be myself. Myself is equal, and I will not be less than that for you to feel better about who you are. She refused to give herself and her power up and over to Adam. Lilith conjunct this new moon. How free are you? How respected are you? Is the respect genuine or is it bought? Is the respect genuine or is it birthed from a place of codependency? Are you together because you truly do want to see each other thrive as individuals and create the most beautiful life that you could possibly create, floating in the unknown? Or are you so scared of the unknown that you would be willing to suffer and be barred from paradise and be breadcrumbed with moments of happiness when the reality is you can experience a life filled with happiness? That's what this new moon in Libra is really asking. You know, Jupiter sextiling on Chiron as well, right? Jupiter at 21 degrees Gemini, sextiling on Chiron at 21 degrees Aries. Chiron is where you sacrifice and martyr yourself for certain healing. And Jupiter is asking us as individuals to look in the mirror and seeing what part of ourselves are we sacrificing. We are sacrificing the self for what? We're sacrificing the self for what? To learn what, right? Chiron is a teacher. What are we seeking to learn with the self-sacrifice? When we have Chiron connections, like if you have Chiron and Gemini, you will sacrifice yourself and go through deep and profound healings to seek out the mirror of the self, to understand the self, to see the face value of yourself. When you are Chiron in Cancer, you will sacrifice yourself for codependency in order to heal into independence. Sacrificing the self for codependency. I would rather sacrifice my highest good and be codependent, is Chiron in Cancer. Chiron in Leo sacrifices their leadership ability. They sacrifice their high status, their high role, the high spiritual order. They will sacrifice it in order to go through these deeply painful and healing lessons, to be taught how to find their highest self, how to rise out of these wounds. That's why people go through these midlife crises around 50 years old, give or take 5 years, because people have their Chiron returns. And if you didn't learn it yet, you will. That's the midlife crisis. It's Chiron return. People who have Chiron and Taurus, will sacrifice their possessions and or sacrifice themselves for possessions, or possessions take precedence in some which way, shape, or form, or the lack thereof does. People will give up everything that they have. They'll sacrifice their money. They'll sacrifice their stability. They'll sacrifice everything that they have for people. Pay attention to your Chiron, because Jupiter is putting the mirror in your face. Jupiter in Gemini is putting the mirror in your face with Chiron and Aries. What part of yourself, right? The aspect that Aries rules, the first house of self. What part of yourself are you sacrificing? And how are the people in your mirror also sacrificing themselves? What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Literally, it's kind of like that song, like, war, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Like, Aries is a war, it's a war sign. It's not good for anything. There truly is no benefit to being at war with the self. And when we talk about, collective things globally, how we're all connected, like when we are at war with each other as nations or tribes or, religious sects, whatever, when we are at war with ourselves, what is it good for? Nothing. It does not serve us to be at war with ourselves. It doesn't serve us. That's why it's so triggering, right? Even Mars in Cancer is squaring on Chiron. And as Mars continues through Cancer, that square is going to become more prominent. The triggers are real. The more you sacrifice yourself, the more you allow imbalanced relationships where you are not equal to your partner, the more you allow it to persist, the more triggering it is. The more triggering it is, all kinds of emotions are going to come up that you don't want to feel. You don't want to feel it. And Venus and Saturn are going to be having this little whisper of a conversation in your ear, but there's good moments. But these breadcrumbs of good moments, aren't they worth it? And the question really is, are you or are you not going to give in to that question? Yes, it's worth it. When it's not. It's not. Saturn will keep you there in that breadcrumb for a very long time. Venus in Scorpio is willing to love to the death of themselves. Yeah, people can stick it out with whatever partnership dynamic it is. They can hold on to things. They can hold on to people. They can hold on to certain business contracts or whatever. They can hold on to their home. They can hold on to all kinds of stuff that they want to hold on to because there's this, emotional attachment. But it's not worth it. It's not worth it. And I think that people in alignment are going to realize that, and they are going to explode out of their shell with that Volcanus in Leo. I think they're going to explode out of it and become something different. Choose different. Be sovereign and independent. Unwilling to sacrifice themselves anymore. Unwilling to martyr themselves anymore. People are either going to align with you and decide that there is this mutual benefit to being sovereign and independent alongside somebody else, right? In these equal and balanced partnerships that allow each other to thrive as individuals, or it's going to feel so fucking restrictive. It's going to feel so fucking restrictive. And the good moments of breadcrumbs are not going to be worth it. It's not going to be worth it. And depending on how long you stay in the contracts and how deep you decide to get with it and how entangled you decide to get with it, emotionally, financially, it's going to start adding up and make it that much more difficult to choose otherwise later. Because, yeah, you always have a choice, but that doesn't mean it's not going to get more difficult as time goes on. It's Saturn. Saturn is going to make it more difficult as time goes on. And I think that it's important to acknowledge that. If you're being emotionally triggered, if it brings you to angry tears, sadness tears, frustrated tears, cry by yourself when no one is watching tears, you got to look at those breadcrumbs and tell yourself it's not fucking worth it. It's not fucking worth it. It's embarrassing between you and your own mirror. How could you look in the mirror and be proud of yourself and not feel a little bit ashamed for submitting to being subservient to a life that it's not your highest, to a partnership that's not your highest? Yeah, you can have moments and breadcrumbs of happiness, but you really can just be happy all together. It's a thing. Being consistently happy, like, don't let people lie to you. Don't let the fear state and the control of people afraid lie to you and tell you that consistent happiness is not a thing. It's a thing. It's a thing. That's the power of this chart. You can lean into it. I highly recommend leaning into it. Have conversations about what is fair, right? Mercury and Libra. Have the conversations about what is fair. If it's meant to heal and become fair, it will. And if it is not meant to be in your highest good, and you have those conversations, you will know you got to let it go. But you have to talk about it. What is fair and what is not fair? If you're not going to talk about it, if you're not going to, talk about how parts of you are being sacrificed and you don't like it, if you're not going to talk about it, how can it heal? Denial doesn't heal things. It just perpetuates problems. And that's the message. So I hope you guys find this helpful. I'm going to wrap this up and we're going to get into the secret code name moon event readings, which I'm super excited about. And I'll see you guys in just a bit. Take care, everyone.